What's the weirdest or most unexpected place you've ended up because you were blindly following a GPS tracker maps? Airport a couple times trying to go to a specific restaurant. Why airport locations pop up in searches for general restaurants. I was using Google Maps at the time a long time ago. I was trying to go to Dave Buster's. The map even said Dave and Buster's Entertainment Center or something like that. However, the address it sent me to was some guy's house whose name was Dave Buster on the other side of town. Once I was driving home from a friend's house. She had just moved in and I had to drive through some area that had virtually no signal to get there. Well, I got lost going back home and this area maps wasn't working, so I resorted to using my outdated car GPS. It kept telling me to turn into a field of corn. I was near tears when a cop pulled me over and said, "Are you okay? I've seen you driving in circles." I told him I had never been happier to be pulled over, and I was lost. Turns out I was pretty majorly lost, and wound up in another town which happened to have no signal and was 1 hour away from home. Poor cop had to write down directions for me to get home. Lol. When they were new, we paid for the Garmin option on a rental car. We put in the hotel address, but wasn't sure it worked. We ended up in front of the Garmin offices in that city. Little fellow didn't know where to go, so just took us home. Back in the early days, my Garmin took me to the middle of a cow pasture when we were trying to get to the Grand Canyon. Pretty underwhelming, honestly. Don't see the draw. I nearly drove my car into a dog park because my GPS said it was a road. Here it's :n.m. Wikipedia.org Wiki 4 seasons total Lensk Pinpresskonferenz media, file 3A 4 seasons total Lensk Pinpresskonferenz.jpg, in the mountains on a literal wildlife path. MapQuest, you failed me for the last time. Not GPS. But in rural Maine I followed my trusty Maine Atlas and Gazetteer out past Rangeley and down logging roads trying to get to a specific place. Unfortunately, I followed it down a road that was clearly abandoned. Kept going even with small trees growing in the road because I had the clearance. Until the road ended in a stream I couldn't cross, and I had to back out. No room to turn around for over a mile. Looked at my map, road was clearly on it. Definitely the correct road. Double checked my map. ID pulled out my 1989 version instead of my 2012-ish version. Road had been abandoned. This was about 10 years back now. Oops. Years ago, when Androids were really finicky, and maps still kind of sucked to use on your phone, I picked my friends up from the airport, and en route to our hotel we took what felt like the longest detour through all of this construction and ended up back at the airport. Not weird, but everyone was pissed off and exhausted. Got turned away at the gates of a huge army base, because GPS routed me to the nearest Starbucks, which happened to be on the base stop. Not me, but one time I was hiking up Aspen Mountain in early winter before the mountain was open and I saw a car driving straight down the front. Not a road, but a ski trail that's definitely not designated for cars, especially when there's hard-packed snow. Big GPS fail. My TomTom took me to some ghetto in Oakland instead of a restaurant in Berkeley because they both shared Telegraph RD. That was fun. Ended up in a cemetery once, late at night, because the GPS insisted it was a shortcut to a friend's house. Found myself in a town with less than 500 people in Iceland during a marathon cause my rental car ran out of battery. Funny ending up standing at the finish line cheering people on surrounded by locals I couldn't understand. In a swamp, wearing sneakers, with mud up to my knees. And this was right after scrambling across a steep ridge of loose rocks facing out towards the sea. Then I had to turn around in the swamp and scramble all the way back again. Girlfriend had a panic attack. Would not recommend. My ex-house. I was on my way to Lackland Air Force Base for a friend's graduation. It was about a 1,000-mile drive for me to get there. I get in the car at 3 a.m., put the base in Google Maps, and head off. That afternoon, the map starts telling me I'm close, but I'm pretty much in the middle of nowhere in the South Texas desert. I think, wow, I guess San Antonio doesn't have any suburbs. Google has me turn into the base and says I've arrived. And I had arrived at Laughlin Air Force Base. Thankfully I was only about 200 miles off course. I'm curious how wrong my destination would have had to have been for me to notice I was in the wrong place. I signed my ex up for global entry. Getting an appointment for his interview was a pain. Then I found out he could get an interview at a border crossing about 2 hours south of us at Mexicali, Calexico. He had an afternoon off, so away we went. The written instructions, in retrospect, clearly said not to use Google Maps. But I didn't read those. Well, next thing I know, where we are supposed to turn left to get to the immigration center is barricaded off, and there was no other way to turn around, so we were forced to drive across the border. I believe he had his passport for the interview, but I did not have mine. The first stopping point we see guys with machine guns and we explain the situation. It must happen fairly often. They told us to turn around and head back at the next U-turn spot. When we got to the gate, we had to go through a secondary identification process. Then they required my car. To get a thorough search, literally ran the entire car through an X-ray machine, searched it with a dog, crawled underneath it, etc. The funny thing is he still was allowed into his appointment even though we were almost an hour late. My employee and I were coming home from a sales call and ended up driving into the lake. HTTPS